Hey everyone, hope you've had a good week. I know some have probably had better than others, but I want to do the teen lesson today. I was scheduled to teach, so I wanted to go ahead and do this lesson. It's sort of a grown up lesson for you teenagers, but I think it's one that's necessary in today's time. And it's called Reach Out and Confront Someone. Now, I hate confrontation, and I know most of you all do too, but sometimes it's necessary. And if God spoke it into Paul and others in the Bible to do it, then I guess we need to learn how to do it and how to do it the right way. Our Bible truth today says we have a God given responsibility to help one another avoid spiritual pitfalls. And in today's time, we can easily fall into those pitfalls. So, this is a good lesson for all of us. But our lesson comes from Galatians 2, verse 11 through 16. And I'm sure this was a hard thing for Paul when he had to confront Peter. But again, the way you confront and the way you accept confrontation is what we want to talk about today. So, confrontation is not fun to receive or give. And you, like most people, probably hate confronting others for fear of hurting them. But ignoring their wrong will ultimately hurt them even more. It's hard to know which is better, especially when you're worried about hurting someone's feelings. Being told that you are wrong can be just as painful. How many times have you ever been overjoyed to be told you were wrong? Not me, but I have been wrong and I have been told that I was wrong. But it's how you accept it. And in my younger Christian days, I can say that I didn't take it well. And I'm just human like everybody else, and some of you guys are too. And sometimes, it's hard to take, and sometimes it's hard to tell. It's hard to confront someone when they're doing wrong. But hopefully, this lesson will give us a little bit of insight to that. But the lesson, and I don't want to spend a lot of time because I know sometimes it's hard to keep teenagers' attention, but I do want you to read at some point today Galatians chapter 2. And I'm going to do just like an overview of it. But what had happened was the church in Syrian Antioch was very important to the history of Christianity. It was one of the first largely Gentile or non Jewish congregations, the first missionary church to send out foreign missionaries, the scene of a controversy that threatened to divide the church between Jewish Christians and non Jewish Christians, and also the stage for a confrontation between Peter and Paul. The focus of this lesson will be the confrontation between Peter and Paul. Although Peter was a pillar of the church, he was acting like a hypocrite. Now, that's harsh words. A growing division between Jewish and non Jewish believers was threatening the unity of the church at its very inception. Some wanted to force Jewish believers to maintain their adherence to Old Testament law, while others wanted to force non Jews to convert to Judaism before they could convert to Christianity. So, what was going on here was that Peter was in the church, the new church after Jesus had ascended. And in the book of Acts, it talks about the church. And here it's supposed to be Jews and Gentiles working together for everybody to become Christians. So the preachers were preaching and everything was going pretty smoothly. And then there were some that came in and said that the Jews felt like the Gentiles needed to be Jewish before they could be a Christian. And I know that can sound confusing, but in Old Testament law, like they had to be circumcised. And that's what it's talking about in these scriptures. But Peter was doing a good job of meeting with everybody. He at the church, he was starting the church at Antioch, or they had started the church, and Paul and different ones had been there, and things were going good. And then sometimes things happen to sort of throw a wrench in it, so to say. But I want you to understand that Peter had gone to Antioch to minister and fellowship with the believers there. He had made no distinction between Jewish and Gentile believers, and he happily ate with both of them as he should have, because they're wanting everybody to be Christians now, Jews and Gentiles. But Peter suddenly stopped associating with the Gentiles, and I want you to get this, because he was afraid of what one fringe group would think of him. Now, think about that in today's time. How many times are we afraid to do something because we're afraid of what a group might think of us? So, Peter, this was being hypocritical because he had been preaching this, and now one group comes in and says, oh, no, now wait just a minute. You can't do that because this one is Gentile and he needs to be Jewish before he can be a Christian. So Peter was pulled to that, and yet in front of everybody, he was still saying this way, that then he wouldn't go eat with the Gentiles. So he was being hypocritical because he was, as some people say, he was talking out both sides of his mouth. So I guess you could say that he was caving into peer pressure. And teenagers today are caught in that. I see it every day, peer pressured into doing something that they know they shouldn't be doing. So Peter knew that this was wrong. That's what made it hypocritical. He knew that he was wrong with doing what he was doing. So 3 things that I want you to think about here. Peter was clearly wrong for at least 3 reasons. He acted out of fear and concern for what this particular group of Christians would think of him. Now relate that to today. How many times are we caught off guard and we're caught doing things or saying things or going places or whatever because we're afraid of what this group might think of us? Number 2, his behavior was hypocritical because he didn't really believe what he was doing. So if you're doing something and you know it's wrong, the Bible clearly says that's sin. So don't do it. And the third is he set a poor example for other believers. Now, teenagers, if you are a Christian, you know you're a Christian, then you need to be the example. What kind of example are you setting? What kind of example am I setting for teenagers? So we all have to be examples for each other if we're Christians. So I want you to think about that. Think about those 3 things. He acted out of fear and concern because of what others might think. His behavior was hypocritical because he knew he was doing wrong and he did it anyway. And then 3, he set a poor example. So how did Paul have to deal with this? And this is something that even today at my age and being saved a long time, before I would confront anybody like a friend at church or a friend at school or a friend, just a friend, that's something that I would have to really pause and think about. And if I knew that it was going to cause them to harm themselves or that they were going to backslide, or it was going to cause them to go in a different direction other than forward in their relationship with Christ, then I would need to stop and think about how to do that confrontation. But in this instance, Paul told Peter to his face right in front of everybody because he felt like that he was doing wrong in the church. Now, this is something that if anything ever happened at church, the first thing I would do would be to go to my pastor. And that's what I would want you to do as well. So, but what we've got to think about is if Paul hadn't called Peter out on what he was doing wrong, then it could have affected the church that we're, not our church, but I'm talking about the church of God and the church of us, the church of today. And it could have really split, a lot of things. So we've got to, Paul, I think, was really led by what God was telling him, and he did it in the way that he felt he needed to do it. Did Peter resent him? I'm sure at the time he probably didn't jump up and down for joy and say, "Yay, Paul's confronting me." But I'm sure he stopped to think, "Oh my goodness, what have I done? And I'm being called out on it. Now, how am I going to use this to be a better person, a better Christian?" And we see later on I think it was in 2 Peter, that it didn't cause Peter to hold a grudge against Paul for all of his life, but he responded because he said that he deserved rebuke in a godly fashion and was a better man for it. But we've got to stop and think, and we've got to do it in the right way. When someone confronts us in an incorrect manner, responding graciously can be a tremendous witness to the love of God for that person. So you do it in a way that is godly, you show humility, you show love. And I want to leave you with 3 scenarios. And if we're back in person next Sunday, I'm scheduled to teach, and I want to talk about these 3 for just a few minutes at the beginning of class because I want to see how you would respond. But 3 different scenarios. It says your Sunday school teacher tells the class they should always be kind, but treats one of the students in a mean manner. So 4 choices. What would you do? Keep silent. It's not your problem. B, talk privately to the teacher about your observation. C, pray that the situation will change. D, complain to others about the teacher. All right, situation number 2. Your best friend, who you know is a Christian, has been shoplifting small items from a music store. How would you handle that? A, stop hanging out with your friend. B, tell a cashier that you think somebody might be shoplifting and to be on guard. C, ask your parents to tell your friend's parents. Or D, encourage your friend to stop shoplifting. All right, and the third and last situation is, and I'd say this affects a lot of you. Your mom tells you that you haven't been treating your little sister well and should apologize to her. What do? A, admit she's right and begin treating your sister better. B, vow to get even with your sister. C, explain that your sister is really the one at fault. Or D, go to your room and sulk. So some scenarios I want you to think about, real life things that could really happen to us. And how would we handle that? How would we confront someone if that was the situation? And back to the Bible truth, it said we have a God-given responsibility to help one another avoid spiritual pitfalls. And your scripture again is Galatians chapter 2, verses 11 through 16. And this explains what went on with Peter and Paul and how Paul had to confront him. So if this ever happens again in your life, if you feel like that it's not because you think they're doing it because you would do it that way or you wouldn't do it that way. That's not the right way. It's God's responsibility. And I want to read this real quick. It says, gentleness and meekness are not the words that most of us would characteristically associate with confrontation. Indeed, when we're talking about confrontational, the synonyms more likely to pick might be defiant or indignant or revolting or combative. Yet in today's memory verse, Paul's inspired words call for a gentle approach in any needed confrontation. And this in the context of someone having been caught in sin. In short, rather than desire they be humiliated, we should desire their well being in humility. And rather than displaying our spirit of sanctimony, like I'm better, I would never do that, we want to display them the Spirit's sanctification. We don't confront to prove ourselves right before sinners, but rather that the sinner prove himself righteous before God, because we're no one's judge and we should never be. So the next time you have to call someone, confront them about something, is there more a mean spiritedness or a spirit of meekness in your approach? So I want to leave you with this. Just always stay humble and kind in everything that we try to do. I love you guys. I hope you have a great week. Pray for each other, pray for our pastor and his family, pray for our church, and pray for our nation. I love you guys, and I'll talk to you soon.